Guys, you're listening to the It Takes a Village podcast, episode 56. This is where the struggles are real, the callings are heavy, the kids are sticky. We come together because it takes a village, and this is your tribe. Hey guys, happy Wednesday. Oh my gosh, I cannot tell you how excited I am to be talking about this topic today because it is one that many women struggle with. And I know that some of my listeners have requested this topic. So today I have Dr. Fiona, and she is the owner of White Lotus Integrative Medicine, and she is a naturopathic doctor. She has written a book called 8 Steps to Reverse Your PCOS. So yes, today we are talking about polycystic ovary syndrome. So Dr. Fiona is going to lay down all the knowledge that we need to know for us. So let's get to this episode. Hey Fiona, I am super excited to have you on the podcast today because we're going to be talking about PCOS, which is a super important topic that I wanted to cover because so many women are dealing with this. And so yeah, I'm just pumped to dig right in and have you on.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I really am honored to be part of your show today.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So before we get started, I kind of want to let everybody know a little bit about yourself, like who you are, what life kind of looks like for you right now, and a little bit about what you do.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm a naturopathic doctor in Toronto, and I've had a women's health clinic here for 16 years. We're an integrative clinic, so we have several different types of practitioners, and we treat all kinds of hormone conditions in women, ranging from infertility to polycystic ovary syndrome to thyroid conditions to perimenopause. So the whole gamut of women's health. And I've written a book. I wrote a book about 1 year ago called 8 Steps to Reverse Your PCOS. So this has been my focus since that book. I've been really focusing on PCOS.
How did this journey of pursuing PCOS in women really ignite for you?
So I have PCOS myself. So of course, because of that, I became quite interested in it. And for the first part of my life, and I actually didn't know that was the cause of all my symptoms. And so once I started learning more about why I was having all of these symptoms, and I got the right blood work and I got the right diagnosis, everything started falling into place for me. So I really want to do the same for other women, increase awareness, and help women get healthier by knowing what's going on.
I'm assuming it's really hard, like other hormonal issues that we face, it's really hard to diagnose and pinpoint that we have PCOS. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've learned a lot more about it in the past 10 years, but it's always been like a really mysterious condition that was misunderstood by the medical profession.
Yeah. And so for people that don't know, what exactly is PCOS?
Yeah, so PCOS is basically, even though it's called polycystic ovary syndrome, it kind of makes you think that it's somehow related to ovarian cysts, right?
Right.
But it's actually not. It's actually a hormone condition. So it causes changes in women's hormones throughout their entire life. And this includes not only hormones like estrogen and progesterone, but also hormones like insulin and cortisol and thyroid hormone. So it's a full body hormonal condition, and it goes throughout the entire lifespan. So it causes problems with ovulation, irregular periods. It can cause infertility. It makes it really hard to lose weight, and it makes women gain weight around the middle very easily. And the other thing that it can do is it's associated with different kinds of anxiety, depression, and autoimmunity and inflammation. So it's got a lot of different aspects to it. One of the things that a lot of women with PCOS have are signs of too much testosterone. So that includes things like acne or hair growth on the chin that's more kind of coarse, and hair loss from the scalp as well.
So that's like a huge range, and I can definitely understand why women, that are struggling with this also have, depression or anxiety, because for somebody, I have an autoimmune disease, and for somebody who, when you go so long for not knowing, you feel like you're kind of going crazy, and then you're dealing with it internally, and not everybody can understand or see, what you're going through, and that can be emotionally tolling for somebody going through what they call them silent diseases.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you look like you're just fine, and then there's all these things going on in your body. And, a lot of the time women don't really even know that that's what it is. They just, are having all these hormone issues. And, a lot of the time it's just like there's no options, or like they're just given the birth control pill. And a lot of the other symptoms actually don't go away from that. So they actually start thinking, well, I don't even know what's wrong with me. And it's really stressful.
Yeah, for sure. And there is so many women. I was looking up the stats for PCOS, and it was saying like approximately 5 million women currently that they know of. Like that's not even the women that, have been improperly diagnosed or don't even know that they have it. And it's very common for women in their 20s to 30s to be diagnosed in that age range. But I've also read that you can absolutely have it outside of those age ranges as well, like as young as like 11 or 8. And
Yeah, it's true. It's actually what they find is even children, when the children who go on to later develop PCOS, there are different signs with what they call adipokines, which are hormones that our fat cells secrete. So we used to think of fat as just this storage tissue or just stored energy, but fat actually secretes different hormones. And women who have PCOS, even as children, their fat secretes low levels of beneficial hormones. And those actually cause a lot of those metabolic problems where they gain weight really easily. You just don't see all the other things yet until they go through puberty. So it's kind of there right from the start.
Okay, so basically almost the same signs, or at least when you get older, you get more of the like physical signs, like the facial hair and trouble with weight loss and those things. Is that how it differentiates from when you're like younger or older?
Yeah. So, what happens like when girls go through puberty, their adrenal glands turn on first, and those make cortisol, and they also make hormones that are testosterone-like. And that actually, the cortisol actually causes you to gain weight, and the reason for that is so that you can have babies. So, but with PCOS, the weight is gained much more easily because there's a lot of insulin resistance. And then you start to see much more weight gain around that time, puberty and onward, or easy weight gain. And then when the female hormones start cycling, the testosterone hormone, because it becomes much more predominant, and it causes a lot of irregular cycles or acne. Like all teenagers, a lot of them get acne, but for PCOS, it lasts longer, or it's more severe, and it's typically on the jawline. But the really far apart cycles are one of like the key things that you'll see in teenagers who have PCOS.
Wow, that's like really interesting. I didn't know that. So what are some of the main signs of PCOS, and like how would we know if that's something that we are possibly dealing with?
So the big ones would be really like any kind of androgen excess, so too much testosterone. So
Okay.
so if you're an adult and you still have acne, especially if it's on your jawline and it's cystic, that's kind of something to think about. Or one of the big ones is if you have significant hair growing on your chin, especially if it's coarse. Now that depends on your kind of skin type. So some women, they don't get that as much as others, kind of depending on their cultural background. But another thing that's really common is, so typically the cycles of women are around 28 days or so, 27 to 30 days, something like that. Women with PCOS, theirs tends to be over 35 days. So that's fairly common. And especially if you combine that with one of those other symptoms like hair growth or acne, that's looking a lot more like PCOS. And that's because their ovulation takes longer, and so their whole cycle takes longer. Usually with most girls, by the time they've had their period for a year or two, like they start to get close to 28-day cycles. But if they're still at 35 or 40 days for 3 or 4 more years, like that's pretty suspicious for PCOS.
Okay, these are like simple signs that maybe we should be paying attention to, because like I'm one of those people that I don't count like my period days, and so I just assume like Like, I'm like one of those people that I'm like, it should be around this time. Like, and
Yep.
then if it comes, that's like good news, obviously. But,
Yep.
so definitely, I guess we should probably be counting our days and like, and also maybe being more aware of like how we feel and what is going on, and not just assuming like, oh, this is a woman thing, or like I'm just getting older, or like really questioning what's going on with our body.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so I'm 42 now, and when I was like in my 20s, all the way up until I was 30, I mean, I never really counted my cycles. And I remember in school they said, oh, women all have different cycles, and this was when I was a teenager, so I was like, oh, that's fine. And I remember I would get my period like every 3 months or so, and I thought that was actually like a good thing at the time. I remember being like, man, I'm pretty lucky. I only get
Yeah.
my period every 3 months. And yet, I had this really severe acne, but if I only knew then what I know now, that would be good. But I think now, like back then, there was like no internet really of any, significance. So you couldn't really look anything up. And so now I think women have so much more, that they can do or they can learn. And so, yeah, like all those types of things, I think hopefully, we're able to get the word out there that if you're going 3 months without a period, that's probably not a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I remember that was me at one point in I see a naturopathic doctor as well. And so she was like, that's not normal, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
well, I was just excited because I didn't have to deal with it. Like who wants to sign up for that? I do, like never having to deal. And yeah, but obviously that's not, your body needs to do those things.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I was blown away by this because I had no idea, but there are actually different types of PCOS, which I am like totally unaware, which just tells you like that we need to talk about this more, because the stuff that we think we know, we don't know at all. And I feel like we need to be more aware of it. But what are the different types of PCOS, and how can we tell which one that we have?
Okay, so this is such a cool question because there's actually so many types of PCOS that, there are certain key types that I can talk about, but also the thing to consider is that PCOS can change from one type to another throughout your lifespan because of things like your age or your weight or your environment. And so because of that, you might be at one type at one time and then, 10 years later, a different type. And because of that, if you go to my website, drfionnand.com, you'll be able to do a quiz that helps you determine, your type of PCOS and which factors are really most relevant for your case. And if you feel like your symptoms change, do the quiz again and you'll get more information on where you are right now. But some of what we think of as types, I guess, are lean PCOS versus classic PCOS. So with PCOS, because it's so easy to gain weight, many women actually suffer from gaining weight around their abdomen. And it's very, very hard to lose this weight too, because there's so much insulin resistance. And that's the more classic type of PCOS. So it's actually more common. And then there are some women who have PCOS who are lean, and they are not gaining weight. They're not overweight. However, they do tend to gain a little bit of weight around their stomach, if anywhere. Like if it goes anywhere, that's where it goes. So they often differentiate between those two as different types. But I kind of think of those as different like severities, of one of the factors of it. So that's one. There is one type of PCOS that's really different, and it's kind of its own type, and that is what we call adrenal androgen excess PCOS. And that's when the testosterone-like hormones actually come primarily from your adrenal glands, which are sitting on top of your kidneys. And in the classic types of PCOS, they come more from your ovaries. When they come from your adrenal glands, it's a little different because that is actually a lot more influenced by stress. So if a woman has that type of PCOS, her stress really makes it a lot worse. The good news with that type is that they're less prone to the weight gain and the insulin resistance and the diabetes that you'll see all the risks for with PCOS. And then you can actually have a combo of those two types also.
Yeah, because I was going to say with PCOS, is that, because I feel like your hormones are so wrapped up in this, like, does that give you a potential to like have other issues? Okay.
Oh yeah, like so autoimmunity, it's very, very common. There's just so much inflammation in PCOS, like because it's basically it's chronic low-grade inflammation because of insulin resistance, and it's there for so long that it causes the immune system to be much more prone to behaving abnormally and kind of recognizing the wrong tissues as kind of a foreign invader. So, there's a really a high rate of Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is autoimmune thyroid in PCOS, but all sorts of other inflammatory conditions. You'll see all of it, like ranging from pain, you know, uh, migraines, TMJ, like all kinds of inflammatory conditions. It's just, unreal, actually.
Many people think that because they have PCOS, they can't conceive. So I wanted to ask you what your thoughts were on that, and if you can conceive, or if you like, or if what are your thoughts on that when you have PCOS?
Yeah, that's such a good question because I think like that's one of the first things people think about when they think
Mm-hmm.
about PCOS because they're like, oh no, they think about it as being an infertility condition, but
Mm-hmm.
it's actually of all the infertility conditions, it's actually one of the easiest ones to treat because women who have this condition, they tend to have a lot of eggs in their ovaries, and so they usually are fertile. They either have no problems getting pregnant or they just need some help. But it's definitely, I don't even like calling it infertility because it's sort of more of like a subfertility, like you're slightly less fertile. And then the interesting thing is like when women who have this condition get a little bit older, their testosterone levels go down because that happens for all women as we age. And because of that, they actually become a little more fertile in their mid 30s than they were in their 20s. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so we need to be so we need to
Yeah.
be more careful about it later on and have that
Yes.
surprise baby.
All the 45-year-old surprise babies I see in my practice, they all have PCOS.
Oh my
The moms who
gosh.
are 45. Yep.
Wow. So for the listeners out there, you might want to be a little more careful because I think that we tend to think that as the older we get, like, oh, we're getting older, so I'm probably getting rusty down there. It's getting like,
Yes.
dusty and cobwebs or whatever. So that's really funny that you say that actually it's the opposite.
Yeah. Now, of course, like the older you get, like I wouldn't want anyone to hold off on trying to
Right.
conceive until that age, right? Because obviously, like it's still harder than it
Hmm.
would be if you were a bit younger. But if you're struggling in your like 20s and then you're like, oh, now I'm 30, or 35, I'm totally infertile. If you have PCOS, that's not the case at all. You probably are I think the peak of fertility is 35 for PCOS, and women tend to reach menopause 2 years later who have this condition. So age is important. Like you don't want to wait too long, but at the same time, it's not, it's completely different in that the fertility doesn't drop off as fast either.
So why is it that PCOS is so hard to diagnose, and why are we like overlooking this?
That is a good question. So I believe personally that it's because there's not enough awareness of how it changes during a woman's lifespan. From practitioners primarily. So, a lot of practitioners still want to see those cysts on the ultrasound. And the reality of that is that that's more common in young women. And then as they get a little older, those cysts tend to go away. The cysts tend to be related really to eggs that didn't fully ovulate. And then there are women who have PCOS who ovulate every month, just a little later, but they often don't have those cysts either. And so a lot of clinicians will be like, oh, they don't have the cysts, and then they'll run their testosterone level in the blood, and that'll be normal. And the problem with the testosterone level in blood is that also decreases with age in women, and they don't change the reference range for age. So that reference range that is there that you'll see, it's like any woman from age like 16 to 50. And so it's like, well, that's not accurate, first of all. And secondly, the measurement criteria that they use for testosterone, it's better, like the lab test, it's better at measuring large amounts that you'll see in males and not really accurate for the tiny amounts that you see in women comparatively.
Mm.
So yeah, even though you can see women who have like tons of this like chin hair that's like obviously like too much testosterone, and then their testosterone looks normal in their blood. That does not mean, that they don't have high testosterone. They do. It's just this test is the problem.
So if there are women listening and they're like, I think that the symptoms, the signs, like they've done the research, they feel like instinctively that this may be something that they're struggling with, but their doctor is telling them no, like what would you suggest that they do?
I would just go find another doctor, and I have a lab test guide. If you go to my website, drfionand.com, or my Facebook page, I have a lab test guide, and it can, goes through all the different tests and what they mean in PCOS. And once you sort of understand the meaning of the tests, you can sort of see. One of the ones, for example, is LH and FSH on the third day of your cycle. And those have a specific look in PCOS that's different. So there's like you kind of want to like do a little bit of investigating and see if there's any markers that fit. If the testosterone's normal. In fact, that one is normal, and I would say 80% of women who have obvious PCOS. Yet, if you look at their other hormones, like their LH and FSH, or you'll see that there's another hormone called AMH, and clearly you'll see that there's PCOS. So if you want to grab those lab test guides, like you can get a lot of information out of there.
Yeah, that's awesome, because that can often be like super overwhelming for us because we don't know, if we haven't studied this and we haven't, we don't really understand it as easily. We tend to just kind of be like, hand it over to the doctor and, just like be at their mercy. But then like you said, having this guide that kind of breaks it down for us and tells us what to look for helps us better advocate for ourselves. And I remember talking about this on another episode, with a woman who suffered from Lyme disease, and she was going through the same thing to where she, had all these feelings, and she for sure had this like gut feeling that this is what she was dealing with, and everybody kept telling her no. And then just like, man, we have to do the work and like be able to say like, no, I think that you need to test for this. And like, we can't do that unless we know what to say or, how to kind of advocate or defend for ourselves.
Oh yeah, it's so true. It's so, so true. Like you really do. And then, once you have that information, you can usually get the answers, by reading and learning and then joining groups of other people who have the same condition, because you can learn a lot that way.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely takes a village in all areas. I feel like we just need that community to help us. Are there any supplements or natural treatments that can work for PCOS?
Yeah, there are so many. I would say the most important thing actually is diet, because it is a condition of insulin resistance, and it leads to diabetes if it gets out of control. And so a lot of the same kinds of eating plans that would work for diabetes tend to work for PCOS as well. One of the ones that we use is based on the food insulin demand, which is the evolution of the glycemic index. And so we have a system based on 4 pillars of nutrition: proteins, veggies, healthy fats, and carbohydrate. And we structure it with those 4 pillars and a certain amounts for each one. And that works really well. So we keep blood sugar really stable, but also control the spikes of insulin that you tend to get with this condition. So that's helpful. And when it comes to supplements, there are so many, but one of my favorite supplements is myo-inositol, which is actually a relative of the B vitamin family. It's actually a really interesting supplement because it acts inside the cell as the messenger for insulin. So when insulin comes to the cell and tells the sugar to go inside, inositol takes the message from that and allows the sugar to come in. So it increases the cell sensitivity to insulin, and because of that, then we don't need to make as much insulin. And that is amazing for PCOS, because when you make a lot of insulin, that causes your ovaries to make testosterone. So there's some there's some different formulas of inositol. There's one that I like to use a lot, which is a combination of myo and D-chiroinositol called ovasitol. And there's a lot of research on the combination of the two in a specific ratio. So that's definitely one of the most researched supplements.
Yeah, because that was going to be my next question is what would you say is the number one game changer for someone who is struggling with PCOS that they could start implementing today?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for sure it's if especially if there's a, if you've got weight gain around your stomach, it's the diet change. Like that's the biggest thing. It's revolutionary. Like it makes a huge, huge difference. And then if you were to pick one supplement, I would probably pick an inositol.
Okay. And would we be able to find those things like in a health food store, or where would we have to look for that?
Probably like well, you can order it online if you go to Ovasitol is the product by Theralogics. So they definitely have it on Amazon and they have their own website. And for the nutrition program, I'm actually going to be launching hopefully in the spring a version of what we use in the clinic for this nutrition program for people who might want to do it remotely. So there's that. But in the meantime, even just following something like a Whole30 diet would be really helpful. Increasing the healthy fats. I don't know if are you familiar with the Whole30?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So that sort of diet often works quite well.
So do you think that gluten has a negative effect on PCOS?
I think indirectly, yes, through two different mechanisms. I think firstly, like gluten is inflammatory for most people in
Yeah.
general. Yeah, and it's, associated with leaky gut. And because
Yep.
there's so much inflammation, it's going to cause a problem
Hmm.
to some degree. And then another way that, it's gluten is really everything that's made of gluten is concentrated refined carbohydrate. And that's the worst thing for PCOS. So like there's really two mechanisms. So it wouldn't be the level of sensitivity that you'd see in someone like a celiac or someone with an autoimmune condition per se, but I usually tell women to, avoid it. They don't usually have to worry about like cross contamination or anything like that, but just, avoid it. But then at the same time, a lot of the gluten-free stuff that you'll see out there, I tell them to avoid that too because
Yeah.
it's just garbage and the kinds of, it's just replacing one refined carbohydrate with another one. And so yeah, there's that aspect. So I always try to clarify the difference between being gluten-free and also just, eating whole foods. And the gluten's not great, but we don't want to be also then replacing that with like refined corn, for
Right.
example. Yeah.
Yeah, because gluten is pretty much, I don't eat gluten. And for those of you listening who are like, how does she survive? Like you survive. And
Yep.
it's not bad. Like, I feel like once you become aware of like other options, I don't know, it's like a habit that you just go down these aisles and you grab these things. And then for me, it was a forced thing that, I do have autoimmune disease. So, for me, it was a forced thing, but I think that even if I didn't have my autoimmune disease, I would still feel the difference between like before when I was eating gluten because it's like nothing. It's like filling yourself up with things that don't even benefit your body at all.
Yeah.
And then now that I don't eat it, I feel amazing and that was probably the best thing that I could have ever done for having an autoimmune disease, but I feel like for having just taking care of my body in general.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. And I mean, I'm not celiac or anything like that, but I don't eat gluten for the most part. If I had it once in a while, I wouldn't worry about it, but I don't have any autoimmune condition, but I probably don't eat it like 98% of the time, and I'm fine. There's so many other amazing foods that you can eat.
Hmm. Yeah, and there is a lot of other gluten. I don't know. I don't want to call them like gluten free products, but there's ones that are actually really good for you. Like I think we just need to kind of practice reading the labels and
Yeah,
not just
totally.
grabbing it because it says, like even the things that say sugar free on them,
Yeah.
you still have to be aware of those too. So the most common drug to treat PCOS is Clomid, birth control, and I don't know if I'm saying this right, but metformin, or how do you say
Yep.
that? Okay, okay.
That's right. Yep.
So
Yep.
what is your take on using those?
So I'm not really against them.
Hmm.
That being said, there are pros and cons to each one. So with respect to, and I think there's alternatives that are better for the most part, but everyone is different. So
Mhm.
with the birth control pill, the pros to the birth control pill are that it will give you a period each month. Now, but it's not going to help you ovulate, which is the real problem with PCOS. So
Mm.
you're getting a period, but you're not making your own hormones. You're not balancing your hormones. You're just replacing your hormones with hormone-like substances. And those are, the big thing I think that's concerning with this is that women who have PCOS, kinds of birth control pills that work the best for PCOS are the ones that are anti-androgen, and those are the most risky ones for blood clots, unfortunately. So you'll see like there's more women who have PCOS who get things like pulmonary embolisms with birth control pills. And the other thing that's the negative is that birth control pills make you gain weight and increase insulin resistance. So that's another big negative on the birth control pills. The positive is that they can definitely make you have a period every month, and in some cases they can help reduce acne.
Yeah, but when you're
So,
ready to have
yeah,
a baby, I can see, like, I feel like that's
yeah.
kind of like you're back at square one when you want to get off the birth control pill and then you're not ovulating and
Yeah.
okay, okay.
Yeah, and then women who have PCOS, they usually have a worse time coming off the birth control pill. It can take over a year to get your period back, and then you have to start dealing with the problem at that time, right? So
Hmm.
then, it doesn't, it's like a Band-Aid that also has side effects that you put on for a time, and
Yeah.
you take it off and the problem's still there, and
Uh,
maybe it's worse in some ways. So yeah, so not a huge fan, but I know there's some women who are on it and they're happy, and I'm like happy to support people with whatever their choices are. So when it comes to Clomid, so Clomid's a little different in that Clomid is for fertility specifically, and it's an ovulation inducer. So it's used only for a short period of time, and so this would only be really useful for women who want to get pregnant. So only in that case, and who can't ovulate on their own. And so a medication like Clomid is used to stimulate ovulation. The the pros of with that are that you're not using it for a long time and it can help you to ovulate. The negatives of it are that the longer that you use it, the more it thins your lining and decreases your cervical mucus, which are positive for your fertility. So it has that
yeah.
negative aspect to it. There's another one that's similar to Clomid, which doesn't have the same effects, like the negative effects on the lining. I don't know what the name of this is in the U.S., but up here it's called Femara. So it's letrozole. So it's a different kind of medication. It's similar though in the way that it acts, and a lot of time that's used instead of Clomid for PCOS.
Okay.
And then the last one is metformin. So metformin is a diabetes medication, and it's used really for the insulin sensitivity. Um, it's not like, it helps a little bit, I would say, but it's compared to what diet can do, it's not as strong. It's a mild helper. But there is good evidence for it. The negatives of metformin are actually pretty bad because for a large percentage of people, it gives them horrible side effects with their gastrointestinal system. So, like diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, all kinds of things, bloating, and pain. And so, a lot of women can't even take metformin for that reason.
Wow. Yeah, that does not sound like fun.
No.
Like I really wanted to talk about this because I feel like a lot of women are taking these things because they feel like it's their only option. And if it works for you and you're listening and you're having good experience with it, then that's great. But for the women that are taking these things and they still feel like they're struggling, like they're at a loss, that's kind of why I wanted to ask you about it because I like want them to be aware that maybe there might be other options. So like if you have PCOS and say you want to get pregnant, is there a natural or alternative route for that instead of the Clomid?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So really, I mean, if they're not ovulating, which is really the only thing that Clomid helps with, there are like for example, if you work on your nutrition with with lifestyle changes, changing what you're eating, learning about how to eat, how to combine foods, your insulin will go down. That'll cause your testosterone to go down, and a lot of women just start ovulating on their own. We also use a lot of natural progesterone in our clinic to help with that because progesterone's only secreted after you ovulate. And sometimes if you're in a situation where you don't have enough progesterone, part of your brain that stimulates you to ovulate called the hypothalamus. It needs progesterone to start the next cycle up again. And so we can use progesterone and to help ovulation. So, and it's completely natural. There's also a lot of other options, which are things like N-acetylcysteine. The inositol, again, also has been found to be as effective as metformin and Clomid. In having effects on fertility. So there are, a variety of different options. And I think it really depends on why the woman's not getting pregnant. If it's just not ovulating, there's lots of options. And the other thing that's helpful is acupuncture. So there's a researcher who's doing sort of a medical acupuncture in Sweden, and she's dedicated her whole life to this. And it's electroacupuncture, and it's done only in the beginning of the cycle, and it actually stimulates ovulation by causing really good blood flow to the ovaries and muscle contraction around that area. And that seems to wake up the ovaries and help with ovulation. So those are just a few of the examples. But if anyone wants to check out my book, and I have a whole big section on fertility, and it talks about all the different options that that are used, and there are so many women with PCOS who conceive with these natural options.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think that your book is probably a huge game changer for women who feel like they're kind of in this box, like they're boxed in and it doesn't fit them, and they're looking for help and they aren't happy with, what they're doing. And so I will definitely link that in the show notes page so that way they can check it out, and also find your quiz online. It's the
8 steps to reverse your PCOS quiz. So that goes through the 8 different factors that are commonly known to cause problems in PCOS. And that allows you to, you end up with a unique type of PCOS, as well as a list of tips for all of the different elements in your case.
Okay, for sure. And if you guys are interested, you can definitely go check out Fiona's website. I will link that in the show notes as well, and you can see all of her experience and her a little bit about her personal story and all that you're doing in your own clinic, because now you have your own clinic in Toronto, like you said, and I think that that's just really awesome, because I feel like as I was reading, it's like so many of us or so many women. And like I emailed you about, have it, or they think they have it, but they haven't been diagnosed. And it's just one of those things where, we don't have to struggle. And I hate that there are women struggling alone and feeling alone in this, because I don't want that. So I think it's really awesome that you're putting this information out there and giving women the knowledge to kind of learn about what their body is doing. So super awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, we just want to increase, empower women to really be able to take care of their own health and know what to look for and have all the information, so that, it can be, the more that know about it, like when, our kids get older, if you have daughters, you'll be able to help them as well. So I think, empowering us with information is one of the most important things right now.
So before we get off, I wanted to ask you these last 3 questions. The first one being, if you could choose the most influential book that you've read, what would it be?
Oh, that's such a tough question. I would say, well, right now I'm reading Braving the Wilderness by Brene Brown, and I love it. I think it's such a good book, especially right now when everyone's fighting with each other all the time. And
yes,
it's so unifying, and I love that book. Have you read it?
No, but I think you might be the second or third person since it's come out, and I've done, had interviews that somebody has said that they've been reading it and that is awesome. And I just need to go out and buy it, because it's one of those things I have on my Amazon list and I haven't just purchased it. Yeah. But yeah, I need to, because I'm in the middle. Well, and I'm also the kind of person that I read everything halfway. So I have 5 books right now that I'm halfway through. And so I'm I can't add another one, but I think I'm going to have to do it anyway.
And she has the Audible version with her reading it, and it's really good, because it's really nice to hear her reading it in this case, I think. Just because it's such a powerful message that she has.
That's really awesome to know, because it does make a difference when the author reads their own book versus when they hire somebody to read their book.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And was there another book or no?
I
Besides
don't know
your
if my
book?
brain can come up with another book right now, but
Okay,
there
just checking.
probably is, but
Okay, just checking. I didn't know if I cut you off on your answer or not.
oh no.
Okay. If you could empower women in one way, what would it be?
I think, what I would probably do is, if I could, I would support women's businesses. Because I think that's very empowering when, women can, be creative and be, able to make their mark on the world with all, the unique gifts that women have, and having businesses out there is really it's just amazing. Like I always love seeing businesses that are run by women and seeing them succeed.
We just started buying from each other because, of so many business women out there, we all sell something or provide something that we all need. And if we were to support each other, then we would be pretty much like set for life, like set for
Yeah.
life and supporting each other. So I think you're absolutely right. And then if you could tell your younger self one thing, assuming that she would listen, what
She
would it
probably
be?
wouldn't. No.
Yeah, see, that's why I always have to throw that in there.
Um, I think what I would say is, I think when I know when I was younger, I didn't really like appreciate who I was or know how to like love myself or be okay with myself. I think there was more of a like wanting to be like accepted and that sort of thing. And I think I would say to myself that, you're good just of, about who you are, and try and get to know yourself, like what you like and what you're good at and all of those areas that make you unique, and then follow that.
Yeah. That's like preach. We need to preach that to all of ourselves. I feel like, yeah, it's the hardest thing to do for a lot of us.
For sure.
Before we end, I wanted to let you kind of let people know where they can follow you, where they can find you. And of course, I'll post it on the show notes. But yeah, share where we can find you on all the social media places.
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook at Dr. Fiona ND. So if you just type Dr. Fiona ND up in the top, my page will come up. So you can find me there. I'm on Twitter at Dr. Fiona ND. And the other place you can find me is if you want to join my newsletter list. We send out newsletters. So if you just go to my website, if you do the quiz, you can join the list. Or if you take the lab test gifts, you can join the list too. Or we have a sign up for the newsletter as well. So those are probably the best ways to keep in touch.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that I had you on, and I think that you shared a lot of information that we can really chew on and digest, and then possibly like seek out more from there. And you also, you provide awesome resources for us to do that. So yeah, I really appreciate you being on and taking the time to kind of hang out with me.
Oh, well, thank you, Ashley. Thanks for inviting me to be on the show. And it's just like an honor to be able to get my word and my message out there to more women. So thanks.
Hey guys, I hope you found that episode helpful, and I hope that we gave you some maybe answers to some questions that you've had about your PCOS or PCOS in general. Hopefully we could provide that. If you want the information that Dr. Fiona was talking about in the podcast episode and some of the resources, make sure you go to ittakesavillagepodcast.com and click on this episode, and there you will find all the things that you need. I wish you guys could see my hands right now because I talk with my hands and they're just going like everywhere. But also make sure you check out my Instagram because that's where I like to hang. That's where I post all my pictures and say a lot of things that matter and don't matter and what have you. So head on over to Instagram and you can search at The Ash Carroll and hang out with me and comment, and I would love to get to know you over there. Also, make sure you join the Facebook group, Today It Takes a Village Facebook group. You can search that and find it and join us having conversations over there. Lastly, oh my goodness, I created a playlist for Spotify that is for you. Oh my gosh. So I took in all the time this is for your top 40 hits. Some are old school. I have some old school thrown in there, but it's a playlist for moms that won't drive you crazy because they're awesome songs that you will love, but that your kids will also know and love as well. Or they might not know some of them, but they will. and you'll love it. You won't pull your hair out. They'll love it, and everybody's happy. So if you go to todayseden.com/playlist, so you can snag that free Spotify playlist, and you're welcome.